So welcome to another episode of Analog Legends. Thanks for joining us tonight for another nostalgic conversation. I'm here with Spencer Scott Holmes. I'm your host, Wesley, and we're going back to the 90s again tonight, and we're revisiting one of the hallmarks of 90s childhood, at least for us and for a lot of other kids too. We're talking about Monday Night Wars era wrestling, Attitude era wrestling, NWO era wrestling, the good old days when they had the best storylines, the best wrestlers, the best video games, awesome t-shirts. Everything was good. This is the peak of everything. I can't think of a time where any of those facets, whether it be television, the pay-per-views, I can't think of a time when it was better in pretty much every facet than that era.
Well, you know, when we were doing the very first episode of this new version of Analog Legends, and we were talking about our top 5 things we totally missed from, 90s culture and lifestyle. And one that, I'm surprised we both didn't have on there, but I thought about it a lot afterwards, was like, it's just watching wrestling in the 90s. Because that's like one of those ones, like, I like wrestling from many different eras, but like the 90s one, it's like, that's like a time period that literally I don't think will ever be topped. No way, no how. That is not that's not just nostalgia talking. That's not talking like old man. Like, it's just one of those ones. Like, that was just wrestling at its most golden age possible. It was just the fade in from like good old 80s kind of over the top superhero comic book kind of characters to coming into total 90s attitude era. Grungy. Just say whatever you can. Be like the least PC you possibly can
envelope.
be. Yeah, just push the envelope as far as possible. It's like everything about those two eras just fused together, or bookend between, the late 80s and early 2000s. Like, it's just such a magical, magical moment. And one of those ones that's like, every single time you watch any old clips or anything like that, it takes you back. But two, it's just one of those ones you're like, man, it sounds weird. I wish I could almost just relive being able to properly just come home, turn on the TV, have the Monday Night Wars on. You can flip back and forth. You have the commercials, even though I know at the time you don't think much of it, but like you want those commercials, and just have that nostalgic of just kicking back and watching TV. Because it does sound kind of weird, but like it's something that's kind of missed nowadays. Is there's no just like watching TV anymore, and I don't mean obviously you can watch a TV that's playing something. But I mean, like, just old school, you flip on the cable or the satellite or the antenna even, and you're just kind of like, whatever's on, that's your choice for the moment.
Yeah, I miss those days. I miss channel surfing a little bit. And I miss this era of wrestling was just so good. And the thing is, we were at the perfect age for it. Like, we were very spoiled because if you think of the target demographic age, just like that 13 through 18, kind of like, adrenaline rush, kind of the age where you're just addicted to that kind of stuff. And when we got at that age, irreverent media was just booming, because not only did you have the Attitude Era where they were pushing the envelope every night and it was kind of raunchy and your parents didn't want you watching it, but then you also had South Park picking up about that time. You had Eminem coming into the fold, late 90s, early 2000s. And so that was just the kind of, Tom Green, just that irreverent, just raunchy ass, like teenage humor for our age. And wrestling was a big part of it. And it was huge. I mean, The Rock was hosting Saturday Night Live. I mean, it was everywhere. And, I can remember being more of a WCW guy because that's what I was allowed to watch, even though I watched both. And then kind of morphing later on into a more of the WWF guy. And as I've gotten older, I've revisited both, and I'm definitely probably more of a WWF fan, but I miss the WCW too. It did some things really well that I really liked also. And man, it was a magical time. And we try not to talk shit on other people's eras and the things that they love, but this is one era where it's just universally accepted. This is the best era. We had it at the perfect age. And I'm really sorry. I mean, there's other good eras. It's actually kind of coming into a good era right now, it feels like. wrestling.
Yeah,
but
I do think this new Triple H era, I guess you would sort of say, I think might be a good turnaround because there's great moments in like the last like 20 years of wrestling, but I will say it does sort of dissipate a bit. Like, you know, once it sort of leaves kind of like the Attitude Era and it sort of goes into, I don't know, they probably have a proper term for it. I always kind of looked at like the sport era where they try to make it feel like it was UFC, because that was where it sort of lost me for a moment. I'm like, I don't want to watch UFC. I'm here to watch wrestling. You know, if the characters if they're gonna all look like sports stars, I was like, it's like that's not nearly as interesting. You know, I want them to look like over the top, you know, characters and whatnot. And then they kind of went to the soft era of like the 2010s, where there's some stuff in there where it's like there's some characters that are just stupid, like it's like, dude, what? I mean, like, yeah, I get it. You're trying to shoot for like an 8-year-old audience, you know what I mean? But like, man, some of those ones, and then there's just some wrestlers too that I think in the early, or nowadays too, that just I almost call them like powder puff wrestlers, and I hate to sort of say it, but there's a lot of female ones that sort of fit in that category where they just they don't sell very well. They just don't look like, I can't believe like what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't mean like I can't believe what they're doing. I mean like, no, it's just like you literally look very, very fake up there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just not buying it. The bumps aren't that hard, you know. Yeah.
I mean, it is getting better. I'm interested to see where it goes when they do Netflix and you're not on network TV anymore. I mean, because there's always two things I've always wondered since streaming's been a thing. Like, there's always two entities I've always wanted to see test the waters outside of cable and, you know, the FCC, and really do whatever they want. And one's wrestling and the other's Saturday Night Live. I'm like, I wonder what will happen if Saturday Night Live could ever go to like Peacock only, or maybe like another network, and it's streaming and it's not on network TV. Like, how crazy it will go. Of course, some of the uniqueness of SNLs when they're in wrestling too, when they're pushing the envelope, but they can only go so far. So you have to have innuendo and be clever about it. And you're just like, they're showing that on TV. Some of that's the shock value of it. You know, but yeah, that era was so good. And the Monday Night Wars was just fucking crazy. I mean, you know, I felt like McMahon thought once he kind of bought out the territories, it was smooth sailing for him. I didn't think he's going to get any other competition. And then here comes Ted Turner along and starts taking up all the guys that Vince thought was washed up. You take Hogan and, you know, you mix him in with Ric Flair and, you know, Macho Man Randy Savage and all these, you know, guys. And then they dominate the ratings for a while. Monday Nitro is the place to watch wrestling. Then you have, you know, the finger poke of doom on the same night that Mick Foley wins the championship, and they fuck it up like massively. Yeah,
it's weird because there's that glorious time of WCW where it's just firing on all cylinders. It's got all the classic guys in there mixed with a crop of new fellas and so on like that, and then that ship just comes crashing down hard, you know. And it's like, it's one of those ones like I always think about, because I remember that day too, that when WWF like bought, you know, WCW, and they had that like whole episode, and you had the last Nitro and all. Like, it's like I can remember those. Like, whenever I see like clips of them, I'm like, God, I literally remember turning on the TV to that and just being like, going to school the next day and talking about it and whatnot. It was just like, holy crap, it's all changed here.
The Invasion era, I will say though, it was, I kind of separate it from the Attitude Era. It was kind of the end of the Attitude Era for me, because they did not do it very well. Overall, because you had WCW and ECW mixed together, which those brands just don't mix. And then also on top of that, you didn't get the big stars in because of contractual stuff. Sting wasn't there, which it took them years to get him there, and then they fucked him over when they got him there. But you know, Sting, that was the big one missing. I don't feel like DDP was there right away. I feel like it took him a little bit of time. And so there was some big stars, you know, they didn't get the NWO back till later, you know, so there was some big stars kind of missing. But the good part of the Invasion was some of the stars that WCW never really learned how to promote, like the Chris Benoit's or the Eddie Guerreros, or, you know, even Dean Malenko and, you know, Fit Finlay. I mean, William Regal, another one. That's another one that was really big, that just were there in WCW. They were just kind of mid-card guys, and they never really got their clout. But man, when they at the WWF, they figured it out. And that was the better part of the invasion, like watching Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit especially move up. Eddie was going to go against Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania if he didn't pass away. I mean, that's like,
Yep.
God, I'd love to see that match. But,
Oh, man, yeah.
you know, that was kind of a weird time, and it was a very bizarre. But the Attitude Era, I think of just those Stone Cold pops and that glass breaks, and it was just like bedlam, fucking bedlam. People were literally shitting in the stands, just crazy.
Stone Cold really has almost like the best like theme song all in all. It's just super simple, but just like when you hear it, you already are pumped. Like it doesn't have to take any more than that glass shattering and so on like that. You know, I mean, like as far as a long song goes, I like the Hulk Hogan ones. Like if I'm gonna have a full song, I'm gonna throw it on my workout playlist. That's what I kind of want. But if you just need to be pumped up in 2 seconds, you just break that glass and you just come out doing the Stone Cold walk, talking trash to everybody, and you're set to go.
That one's good. Goldberg's is good. My favorite two, probably. I'll give you 3 of them I really like. First two both have to do with Shawn Michaels. Both his theme, just the Sexy Boy theme, is great. The other one is I love the DX theme. Oh, you ready? Don't. That was so good. And then I really like the Mr. McMahon theme.
Yeah, he has a great one, especially for the fact that for like just an old guy coming out with kind of like, you know, like almost a rap rock song thing. Like just like so much attitude.
So perfect for the time. You know, WCW, they didn't do as well with that. Like, of course, they have Jimi Hendrix with Hogan, which is fucking amazing. I mean, that's incredible, but I don't really consider it like a real one. Like in DDP has Nirvana, basically. It's like, Smells Like Teen Spirit. But the one that was good in WCW was the NWO Red, the Wolfpack theme.
Oh, yeah.
With the rap, that Jimmy Hart wrote, by the way, which kills me because it's legit pretty good. Yeah. And when I found out he wrote that, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this guy's amazing.
Yeah, Jimmy Hart wrote so many of those songs. That blew me away when I first heard that, too. I was just like, man, that guy is so talented.
Wolfpack is back, cause mass struggle. Yeah, it's like, this thing it's good. It's actually pretty good. That's one of the few WCW ones, you know, that really kind of mixes in there. But that was another thing that was just the theme songs were so great. The only one post Attitude Era that was, I think, is as iconic. Probably John Cena's.
Because John Cena's what I always love about his, because John Cena has such a weird theme when you really like think about it. Like if you don't know that guy, you're like, what is this? It's like it's a real white looking guy, but he's got this like sort of Mexican rap thing going on. So he just sounds like a very confused kid out of the suburb.
He's basically Marky Mark. Is the way I've always viewed John Cena. He's Marky Mark. If he'd stayed Marky Mark and became a wrestler instead of an actor, that's who John Cena is.
100%. Marky Mark could have become a wrestler almost if you really think about it. I mean, he would have been a smaller guy, but he had the body.
Oh yeah, he had the physique for it. I don't know if it's, you know, can you take a bump? Is the whole thing.
Yeah, there's always that. Well, if Jay Leno can, okay.
Fair.
Sure, Marky Mark.
Yeah. Fair. Gosh, if I was to do my life over again, because I was a pretty decent athlete. I was pretty athletic, and I wanted to be in acting. And if I thought about it, I was like, man, that's what I should have done. I should have done it. Like I think I actually legit I think I would have been pretty good. I think I would have been pretty good at it.
You know what? There was a wrestling school that was in the Bay Area in Hayward, California, and I went there and I called the dude because I just wanted to get some information on it. It was like when I kind of had a comeback to wrestling. Like, okay, you know, I watched wrestling in the Attitude Era and everything like that, and then maybe fade out in about the mid 2000s just for a little bit, not a whole lot, but just a handful of years. And then like it was right when Netflix kind of started their streaming, and they had a bunch of WWE stuff on there. So I remember like me and my buddy watched the living daylights because it was like we got like our first apartment, and like every time we go before the gym, we'd watch like a WWE documentary to get all pumped up. And then I was just like, because like I'm the kind of person, if I get into something slightly, I kind of like go all the way sort of and go, whoa. What would it be like to go to full distance? Hey, there's a wrestling school right over here in Oakland. Let's go take a look at this. Or at Hayward. And I remember I called the dude, and the dude's like, "Oh, come on down," everything like that. He's like, "I just really want information." But he's like, "Yeah, we'll get you tickets. You can come check it out." And then he took me on the whole tour of the place. He really wanted to get me signed. I mean, I think he just really wanted like the $3,000 or whatever. But at the same time, he was really trying to get there. And then I remember my buddy, because he's like, "You know anybody else?" I'm like, "Well, my buddy kind of likes wrestling too." So he started calling him all the time. And then we were watching this other documentary. I think it was like that Beyond the Mat one and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Dude, there's the dude. He's in this documentary." He's like, "That's the guy that calls me all the time." I'm like, "Yeah, that's him right there."
That's crazy. That's fucking wild that you met that guy.
But I always kind of wish I went to Disney. I'm like, I should have just paid the $3,000 or whatever it was. Like, you know what? That wasn't. I mean, at the time, that's like that kind of thing. Like, $3,000. 15 years ago that's like probably $9,000 today. But at the same time, that's just one of those ones. Like, I feel like even just the experience is something I kind of went like, you know what? That would have just been kind of fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just to have the experience, even if you didn't, go all the way up to the top, but just to say like, "Hey man, I wrestled indie for like a couple of years." Like, I just think that's just such a cool story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
just learn to take a few bumps and, put together a character and just see where it goes, You
know what? I always think about it this way. Diamond Dallas Page didn't start till he was 35, so there's still kind of a chance.
Yeah. Not for me. I'm like past it. Like, I mean, I could get in good shape and could do like that stuff again. Like, LA Knight's kind of like in his 40s, I think. He's just starting his run really. So, I guess if I was going to do it back in the day, I probably would have had to go to like Atlanta, because I think that's where the WCW like house was. But I mean, I wish there was more stuff in Charlotte. If there would have been more stuff in Charlotte, I probably would have done it. And I'm surprised there wasn't, because Ric Flair was living in Charlotte, Ricky the Steamboat Dragon, both of them I saw in Mooresville, which is really close to me. And I think Arn Anderson was down there too. I think he spent most of his time in Georgia, but I think for a little bit he was in Charlotte area too. So I probably should have done it, man.
I just think it would have been pretty cool. Well, I have my friend Buddy. He was into wrestling, and he literally went to that APW school that I was talking about for a little bit there in Hayward. And literally, when he was going, Chris Christopherson's son was there too.
Really?
And Chris Christopherson like literally has a house that's only like 10 minutes up the road from me. Like a ranch house up there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those ones you always think about, like, you should just go take a look. And nowadays, I feel like you probably can't just, like, wander around onto someone's property anymore without danger, but or being just on camera 90% of the time. But yeah, you know what I mean? It's just like, and there's something kind of cool about it. I don't know, even to this day, I still have that urge every once in a while. I'm like, you know what? That wrestling always does sound kind of fun,
Well, before we get to our top 5, I haven't checked up on it in a while, but this would be the way to do it. There's this like brand out of like, I think it's in Tennessee. It's a backyard wrestling thing, but they have a ring, and they do it up like this Nitro, and they put their videos on YouTube, and like it's a storyline like every week, and you can follow it, and they have their characters and their champions and all that stuff, and it's just like a backyard wrestling league. And if I was gonna do it, that would be the way to do it right there. It's just all you need is a ring and some buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And you could like literally start a wrestling league, and that would be actually pretty fun.
Especially nowadays too, because you could kind of get away, as long as you got all the cameras and everything like that, you're all set up.
Yeah, I might put a link to it here. I can't even remember what it's called. I saw it, I guess it's been about a year ago since I've seen it, but I'm like, damn, that would be fun to do. Got my creative juices flowing. I was like, oh man, I started promotion, Vanilla Thunder. That would be my wrestling name, I think. So I don't know, but so what we're doing tonight is we're going to do our top 5 from each promotion, favorite wrestlers, and we'll inevitably talk about some matches and some fun moments that we remember. I know for a fact that there's a story I want to tell, and I've told it before, but some just interesting moments that we remember from watching wrestling in the past, and the wrestlers that we gravitated towards from each brand. We'll definitely have some overlap this time, but I'll be interested to see how it goes. So are we going to do like one WWF and then one WCW and back and forth? Is that how you want to do it?
Let's do that. I think that'd be kind of the cool way to go.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And we'll try to keep it brief. We'll just kind of dive in because I have my list ready. So, yeah, top five from each promotion. I think I guess I'll go first this week because I'll start with we're going five down, so we're going from five to one, and I'll start with my WWF one, and actually my fifth one, my favorite one. There's better wrestlers, obviously, but I loved Mr. McMahon.
Oh gosh, you know what? I thought about putting him on there too, just because it's just so magical for like the fact that like here's a guy who's the boss of the company. There is no reason one bit that he needs to be out there at all, but he comes out there, learns wrestling at a late age in life, takes bumps like a champ, has one of the greatest feuds with Stone Cold Steve Austin. You know, Vince McMahon told me, or like, you know, because of his storyline, you learn that if you have a boss problem, all you need to do is crack open a couple of beers, give someone the Stone Cold Stunner, you know, and give them the double bird, and you are set to go for a promotion.
Yeah, that's how you get from. That's how you move up. That's why I haven't yet, because I'm not ready to give somebody the stunner. But
yeah, you always got to crack the two beers though afterwards. If you don't crack the beers though, spray them out all over the place.
Yeah, no, Mr. McMahon, that was such a bold idea, and it was like, you know, Stone Cold during his run was just. I don't think anybody's ever been as hot as he was when his run was going. Like the crowd would go nuts for him. Everybody loved him, and he had. What's so interesting is that he, you know, had this feud with Shawn Michaels that kind of fell apart because Michaels left the company for a while and, you know, was hurt or whatever. And then, you know, obviously the Rock matches were really, really good. But his best feud, his actual best storyline is actually against Mr. McMahon. It's Vince McMahon. And just, God, that was good. And you could almost do like Vince McMahon / Shane McMahon, because Shane McMahon was really, really good too. Is probably actually the better wrestler of the two. And he was bold. He was so brave. Do some crazy shit. But yeah, Mr. McMahon's my number 5.
Yeah, well, you know what? That makes sense, though. I mean, you could even say McMahon, like, for, like, all, you know, all the stuff he does, not only putting it together, all the wrestling and bringing all this, doing the announcing and all kinds of stuff. It's like the thing is so interesting about him is how much different things he does in one company. He's not just sitting there like the owner. No. He worked it from so many different ways. He's involved in the storylines. You know, he's literally in there and so on like that. And realistically, that might even be the greatest wrestling storyline ever is the Stone Cold McMahon one, because it's almost like the most, like, relatable story. Like here's the thing, it's like, hey, do you hate your job at home or something like that? Do you ever just wish you could just go up and give your boss the old stunner? Beat him up while he's in the hospital, you know what I mean? Like that's why I think that works so well, because you know there's some people sitting at home and like, yeah, fuck that guy, like that's who I want to be, that's my man.
Yeah, most of my immediate bosses, including the one I have now, are pretty cool, but man, there's been some higher ups who there's been some higher ups that just like, you need a Stone Cold Stunner. You need to shut the fuck up right now.
Yeah, there's just those ones like that. So I think that's always the thing that really makes that one stand out so much, is just that there. And I'm glad you put that on the list. I think that's a cool one to have.
Yeah, I think that was, I mean, definitely better wrestlers, but he was one of my favorites. I loved anything with Mr. McMahon. And I didn't like it as much when I was younger. I liked it, but not as much. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, man, that was fucking awesome.
Well, I think it makes more sense because, like, I feel like when you're watching it as a kid, you're watching it like at 12 years old. You're like, let's be honest, it's not like you really have a job yet or anything like that. So you're looking at it at like sort of different eyes and whatnot like that, where you can see when you get older and so on like that. I mean, as I said, if somebody has like a bad job, I definitely could see where they probably would go like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do. This is what the change I've been looking for.
Somewhere in the late 90s. I don't know where it was, when it happened. I don't have the story in front of me, but it happened. Some boss got the stunner somewhere. And, you know, we know where it came from. So,
yeah.
So what's your WWF number 5?
So my 5, I'm actually going to go somebody who probably is like one of the top tier as far as wrestling parts go. And that's Bret the Hitman Hart.
Oh, my God. Love Bret the Hitman Hart. Late era, not as much, but man, that early era,
yeah,
probably for me, up there at the best.
The lead in 90s, kind of like the late 80s and the early 90s, because he was kind of like one of the first wrestlers I ever gravitated towards, was Bret the Hitman Hart. And he's one of those ones like both like his tag team run in the 80s, amazing, Jim Neidhart and all that stuff. But then when he just became the solo act and whatnot, he's just got a great look. He's just got the dialed in wrestling style. The downfall is sort of Bret Hart that kind of brings him down as time goes on. It's not necessarily, but he always kind of has been like sort of the guy that bitches for like the last 30 years about all kinds of stuff. And that, I hate to start saying it, like, there comes a point where you're just like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, just... I get it. Not everybody's going to be as good a wrestler as you are. Nobody comes from a wrestling family. Yeah, they kind of screwed you over when you wanted to leave the company.
Yeah.
Sometimes I kind of even have a hard time there. It's like, dude, you're the one leaving the company. I know you want to have this perfect ending, but let's be honest.
Yeah. It's true. There's two sides to that, the Montreal screw job. It really, I mean, I get both ends of it. It sucks that it happened in Canada. If they had done it somewhere else, I don't think it would have turned. If it not have been in Montreal, if they had done this in fucking Charlotte or Boise or wherever, I don't think it would have. I think he may have cooperated more, but my God, he did not want to lose that belt. But the thing is with Bret Hart too, he's the pinnacle of this problem for me. And there's two types of wrestlers, and my number 5 for WCW, it has a lot of overlap with Bret Hart. But there's some that just bitch and complain because they just hate how the business went, and they're jealous and they're whatever, bitter. But there's some that bitch and complain, and I don't think they could ever separate the fact that it is a real athletic event, but it is not, in terms of results, a real sport. It's like you could be competitive, like politically within the wrestling. You can get the belts, so you can get the main events and all that stuff. I get it, it's competitive, but like you're not actually wrestling. You know what I mean? The result is somewhat predetermined most of the time. Yeah, sometimes you decide it in the ring, but it's like it's a decided upon thing. There's going to be a winner and a loser, not because of who the better wrestler is. And sometimes they can't separate that. And of course, it was a real thing. Brock Lesnar would have beat everybody.
Yeah.
But it's not. So,
yeah. Andre the Giant would have just ended up really slapping people real hard and giving everybody concussions.
Yeah. Andre the Giant, Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle.
Kurt Angle. Nobody would have been able to out wrestle him.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it would be a whole different thing. So, I mean, it's just, he can't separate it. But I got Bret Hart later because I didn't get to watch WWF during his like peak WWF time. And then WCW Bret Hart was kind of like he is now, kind of whiny. He'd go out there and talk about his cat, very melancholy. Yeah,
well, he was kind of in that weird bad guy phase, which he's one of those few people that just, the heel thing was kind of odd for him. Like, when he was doing like the anti-American thing, it was like, okay, that one can kind of work because he just went full Canadian, you know, but some of the other stuff he would do too, it's just like, I hate to sort of say it, it's like, I know Hogan just pulled this off recently, but not everybody needs to have both a heel and a babyface like era in their lifestyle.
They needed to have him be, when they brought him to WCW, putting him in the NWO was such a huge fucking mistake. They needed to, honestly, what would have been really cool if he kind of started his own clique to rival it. Would have been the best way to do it. Maybe get Chris Benoit in there, Neidhart. I know Benoit was a 4 horseman, but the 4 horseman was barely a thing there. Most of the WCW time, that era, the Nitro era. But man, I could see like Bret Hart, Chris Benoit, Kurt Hennig, Jim Neidhart, British Bulldog was there for a while. Like that group, that clique together versus the NWO would have been a cool way to go. Have Sting kind of in the middle of it, But yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm not the booker, but I wouldn't have put him in NWO, and that wasn't his fault. That was just what they decided to do. Yeah.
He just kind of, he definitely underused there. But at the end of the day, like all the classic matches, of Bret Hart is just, I feel like he's one of those guys that really makes that early '90s era pop hard.
He, and along with the person who I have at number 1 in WWF, he has more classic matches other than that person, because he just has so many. Stone Cold, like was it WrestleMania 13? Stone Cold and Bret Hart, like insane, just so many good matches. So He put on a damn good show. Brett did. So, I do want to snake this. You can go. You start off the WCW.
Okay. So we're going to WCW. So I'm gonna go with one of the guys that was kind of like one of the guys I literally caught my eye on, like one of the very first Nitros I ever kind of watched, and this is Ultimo Dragon.
Oh man.
Yeah, like this is the one. I mean, I think just as a kid, you throw in that kind of kung fu martial arts aesthetic to wrestling, and I was already kind of sold with this. And I was like, here it is. And he just had all the cool high flying moves and everything like that. And in so many things, it's like he's been around for like ever. He's, never been like fully utilized, I think, in a lot of the American stuff, of course, but he was always, I always remember he was always one of those guys that, like, in a lot of the, pay-per-views and a lot of the big matches in WCW, he always had something going on in there and something like that. And then he had that like very brief run in WWF or WWE, because by the time he got there, that's when it was. And then from there, I think he's in Mexico. Like he does like a training school down there. So you could go learn from him down in Mexico.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I mean. That would be the place to go. Honestly, I'm not going to, Canada at this point. I mean, that whole, the one area where WCW 100% beat WWF, the one thing they had on it was that cruiserweight division.
Yes.
WWF had nothing like that. And fucking Ultimo Dragon, Rey Mysterio, which Rey Mysterio goes to WWF later, but it wasn't the same as the cruiserweight division. He was good there. He had some of his best stuff, but that Juventud Guerrera and then La Parca, which he's not a cruiserweight, but he was there. Eddie Guerrero. Psychosis. Yeah, Psychosis. I mean, Juventud doesn't get enough credit. That guy was insane to watch. Anytime Rey Mysterio and him went against each other, I was like, oh, I'm in. Dean Malenko was always in that mix. But that cruiserweight division was fucking fire, man. There was some good shit in there. That was where it was at. Yeah,
well, and that's the thing too. People always talk about like the headlining matches and so on like that. And I don't know, in watching, especially back in the day, because a lot of times I watch a lot of these things on VHS. Like a buddy would get the copy of the pay-per-view, from arcade or something like that. Even those the matches leading up, it's like I didn't look at those like there was any different from like the top tier matches too. It's like dude, some of those like high flying cruiserweight ones were like literally solid, even better than a lot of times the main event.
They would put those on first, and I would always think, even as a kid, I'm like, that's a mistake. That's a mid card fight right there. That's like you want that in the middle of the show when people are starting to get lulled and kind of boring.
Yeah,
especially when Nitro was 3 hours fucking long. I mean, like that's when you put the cruiserweight match. You start off the show with like a tag team match is pretty good, but you need those cruiserweights, man, put on a hell of a show. It was always really good, and Ultimate Dragon was definitely one of the best ones.
Yeah,
definitely the best outfit, because it always kind of reminded me of the Green Ranger, because he had like the shoulder pad kind of thing going on. Like,
yeah, totally. Yeah, because that's what I feel like it was. It was sort of like definitely like it's like, hey, Power Rangers is kind of popular right now. Mixing some Bruce Lee, because that's always classic. I like how like he originally wanted to be called like Tiger, whatnot, and then it's like they're like, no, like why don't you go by Dragon? He's like what, like Bruce Lee? He's like, Bruce Lee's Chinese and I'm Japanese. Doesn't matter. 90s.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah, that's true. That is probably what happened. Yeah, I always liked him too, and he kind of gets, I think, lost because of Rey Mysterio and how good he was, and he had the mask on too. But yeah, right. Ultimate Dragon was good. Did I do so? I'm at 5 WCW now.
Yeah.
So my 5 is a guy I honestly didn't want to put on there because I've gotten so tired of his bullshit, and he is the epitome of why podcasting has been great for wrestling and terrible for wrestling. Because it's great because you get to hear all these awesome stories, and like you get to relive all this stuff, and then it's terrible because some of them just bitch and groan and whine and complain. And this guy wasn't a great wrestler, but man, he during his height, which was in WCW, in my opinion, man, he so good on the mic, had such a presence, great look, and put on some pretty good matches. He was actually kind of underrated a little bit in terms of the matches he put on, but I'm talking about Kevin Nash. And he's become a whiny ass bitch over the past few years. I cannot. Anytime there's a clip of him talking, I just skip it because I can't hear him. He bitches about all these guys aren't in shape enough anymore, and this guy was an asshole, and this guy was an asshole, and Goldberg screwed me over, and this, like, dude, shut the fuck up. Okay, go film another Magic Mike and shut the fuck up. But man, during your run, Big Sexy Kevin Nash is definitely one of my favorites. And he was the most important part of the NWO because Hogan was there for shock value. That was like, that grabbed all the attention. It was on Sports Center. It was on the news when fucking Hulk Hogan became a heel. It was a big deal, and Hogan was great. But Kevin Nash ran that shit because Scott Hall was only there, when he was sober.
Yeah.
And so Kevin Nash was the NWO, and then when they became NWO Red, he was the NWO Red. He was the Wolfpack. He was the whole thing. So he deserves a lot of credit because that era of WCW, I mean, he was kind of the glue for a little bit there. Like, Sting wasn't always there, but if you go to the late WCW when they needed a main event, you had Kevin Nash. Early, when he got there, obviously early NWO was massive. So I'll put him in there, even though he annoys the shit out of me these days.
Well, it is kind of true, though, because if you really think about it, especially Kevin Nash and Scott Hall doing the NWO thing, and I always think of them as the main ones. I know Hogan's kind of there, but I always feel Hogan's sort of like he sort of shoehorns his way into that totally. He works, don't get me wrong. I like Hogan as NWO Hogan and Hollywood Hogan, but I always think of it first and foremost as Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and especially Kevin Nash there doing it. And that almost might be that one kind of thing that is that kind of the main moment that really gives WCW its golden era run? Is it mainly because of those kind of guys, and then everything else sort of follows suit? It's like totally. Like, I feel like that if you didn't have that NWO invasion kind of angle and this, like, the ultimate 90s kind of attitude, grungy, almost like it's shot like a different, production, it has like the Ben Stiller like show kind of look to everything.
Yeah.
It's like one of those ones, there's so much of that stuff there that, like, I feel like they almost kind of really create the Attitude Era, and then WWF takes it and goes even farther with it.
They did. That's what they did. They created the Attitude Era, and the NWO was a blessing and a curse because when Hogan joined, they needed that because it was such a good angle the way they brought Scott Hall and Kevin Nash in. It was so awesome and so interesting. But when they turned the ultimate good guy into the ultimate bad guy, when they did that just sent it over the top. That was insane. But Kevin Nash was the glue that whole time, even when it switched factions up until the finger poke of doom, which you gotta blame him somewhat for too, but not fully, not even Hogan fully for that. But yeah, Kevin Nash was awesome. He had a great stage presence. He had some good matches too. Like that match with Scott Hall and Halloween Havoc was really, really good. The Goldberg Nash match was actually better than the Goldberg Hogan match. So if you put him in there with somebody who was a really good wrestler, he could put on a really good show. So people like to shit on him now. It's like, oh, is your knee hurt again? Or like, you weren't even that good of a wrestler, but he, for a big man, was actually pretty solid. Not as good as Taker or, even Big Show really, but he was good.
Yeah, no. He definitely is a good one to have on the list. And I think definitely his WCW run is his kind of major part. Diesel's a good character too, but like it's really just like the start, when he really becomes, full on NWO Kevin Nash. That's when it all comes together. I
agree. Yeah, that way cooler character in Diesel, especially when they tried to copy Diesel with Kane before Kane became Kane.
Yeah.
That's bad. All right, so we both done our fives in each.
So we're at our five, so now we're moving up to four.
yeah, we'll have to move it along a little bit quicker.
It's okay. You'll probably start to overlap, I think, as time goes on. We say this now. We'll see what happens.
All right, so wait, it's your turn. So what's your 4 WWF?
So my 4 WWF is Shawn Michaels.
Oh, okay.
So
we do have some overlap here, but we'll save it for a little bit.
So if we got a little overlap, we could talk some Shawn up right now. But
he's my number one. I'll say that.
Okay, there we go. Well, Shawn's one of those guys too that, like, especially as a kid too. That was my other real go-to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Shawn Michaels always. You know, it's like one of those ones. I feel like I put that right above like Bret Hart because it's almost like as time went on, it's like no Shawn Michaels. It's like. You know, everything about he had the charisma, he had DX, him and Triple H on their run. But even just like the early Shawn, I mean, you got the Rockers or whatnot, but then you also have him that, you know, the classic ladder match that, you know, of course, Bret Hart always bitches about that he invented the ladder match and nobody let him use the ladder. And yeah. That's the only thing about that book. It's like his book's like 700 pages of him being like, oh man, Ultimate Warrior. He went to school for 6 months to learn wrestling and now he's above me. Oh,
Yeah. Goldberg kicked me in the face, and he didn't even know how to wrestle. And
yeah.
It's a show, Brett. It's a show.
Yeah, and I mean, I do kind of get it because like I've thought about that more as time goes on. When there is some of those wrestlers, it's like you literally been wrestling for the last 15 years, and some guy shows up out of a gym. He goes to a 3-month like crash course on wrestling, and now he's like at the. I can see where that is a little bit of like a.
I get it, but I also don't because it's like a show. It's a show.
Yeah, it's a show. I mean? And look at Ultimate Warrior. Like, how do you not want to see that guy on TV?
And he did suck. Ultimate Warrior and Goldberg are very similar.
Yeah, they just. I just feel like they didn't have tons of early days training. They weren't like in, you know, AWA or any of those other ones. But
they said get this fucker on TV now.
Yeah, now rip him out of the gym, rip him off the football field, put him in the ring.
Yeah,
But Shawn, you know, he's been around literally since like the early 80s and whatnot like that. And he's just got the look. It was cool because he's sort of he was kind of one of the first like smaller guys, even though he's not like ridiculously small. I mean, but comparatively, he's not, you know, a Hulk. He's not an Ultimate Warrior. He's not an Andre. You know, I think he's like 6'1". It's always kind of hard with wrestler height because sometimes I think they always lie about their height and give everybody like an extra inch or two. But, you know, he kind of felt like he was that guy that you're like, you know, if you tried hard enough, you know, you could almost reach that. Like, you know what I mean? Put on some weight, you know, get your athleticism up and everything like that. He's almost like the one where it's like, you know, you're not going to be Hulk Hogan. You're just not going to be that big of a guy, you know. But the Shawn Michaels he had the attitude. And, you know, we say that like NWO was the attitude era. Well, I feel like the part that follows right after that, though, is when you get G-Generation X with Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And that's pretty much the other start of the attitude generation for WWF.
Well, you know, when Hall and Nash left WWF, they had that famous moment where they're in the ring with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. That was supposed to be the NWO. And the NWO, that was the only thing that could have made it better. You got to keep Hogan in there. But if they could have had, you know, X-Pac and Shawn Michaels and Triple H in there when it all started and leave everybody else out. Don't add anybody else to it.
Yeah,
but that
don't
group
make it too big.
Yeah, maybe Macho. You could throw Macho in there for a little bit, but that's about it. But if you just had what the DX was and the early NWO was, if you mixed that together, that would have been the perfect click of all time. But man, I think Shawn's my number one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think because if you're looking at top 20, if you aggregated the list of top 20 matches of all time, Shawn's going to be in more of those matches than anybody.
Oh,
I
definitely.
Think. Yeah. And I mean, he worked well with anyone. Stone Cold worked well. He didn't even he was such an asshole when he did the Stone Cold stuff, but he worked well with him. But Undertaker, you know, it doesn't matter. Like the guy could be giant, the guy could be smaller. Chris Jericho, Kurt Angle, he worked with well. I mean, just
Razor Ramon, you know,
Yeah, Scott Hall. I mean, the only thing you can hold against his career against is that he never had a run with The Rock. That's the only thing that really it still irks me to this day that we never got a Rock Shawn Michaels thing.
Well, Shawn did kind of go in and out of those back issues, like, because that was always the thing. It's like he would go for a bit and then be like, oh, I gotta go out for a year or so, it seemed like. And then he'd come back again, which I always give him kind of credit. He would always kind of come back, you know, because he was one of those few guys that like, he was like a very long haul wrestler. That's the other thing I think, you know, where a lot of guys, they put in like their 10 years or so, and then they either kind of pull back a bit or they go into other avenues or something like that. Like Shawn Michaels was one of those kind of guys. It's like, dude, he was still wrestling like generally all the time throughout the 2000s. You know?
Yeah. He had, that first run, you could talk about the Heartbreak Kid era, and with Bret Hart, great match, so many great matches with Bret Hart. Then the Razor Ramon match, and so many others. And then he kind of gets hurt for a while after the Stone Cold thing, loses the championship belt, comes back, and then he has another great run. And he didn't even win a lot of those matches. Like, he would lose at WrestleMania a lot, lost to Kurt Angle. I think he lost to Undertaker. Which, by the way, if somebody's going to break the streak, it should have been him, not Brock Lesnar. But I don't think anybody should.
And I personally, nobody should have broke the streak. That's like one of those ones, like, because it's Undertaker, there should have never been a streak broken.
I totally agree.
Any other wrestler, sure, but like, because we have Undertaker being kind of like, in a sense, he's like demonic. I feel like that's enough reason that he could never lose.
Yeah, I totally agree. That streak should have never been broken, especially by Brock Lesnar. I like Brock Lesnar. Don't get me wrong, but he's not the guy. But man, Shawn Michaels. I was just watching earlier with my son the Shawn Michaels Undertaker match at what was that, 25? I think
so, because I have that DVD of it, and
oh man,
great one.
Yeah, and he comes out in all the white, and Undertaker's, in the contrast of the black stuff, and it reminded me actually of Gladiator when Joaquin Phoenix comes out in the white armor, and I just like, so yeah, Shawn Michaels is my number one. The main reason why is because Ric Flair, who I think is probably, when you look at everything, the best wrestler of all time, Ric Flair said Shawn Michaels is the best. So he said that multiple times. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, well, I think Shawn Michaels is like the full package. I think he literally has so much going. He's like the kind of guy that you can mix him in all sorts of stuff. He's great in tag. He could be the cruiserweight guy. He could be a high flyer guy, even but he could also take it on with the heavyweights. So it's like, you put him wherever, he works.
Totally agree. Well, so that was your 4 and my number 1.
Okay.
So we had some overlap there. So we're going through this a little bit. So we're at my 4 WWF now.
Yeah.
So my 4 is way too low, but there was some other characters I gravitated towards more. But this is the number 1 guy in the Attitude Era, and that's Stone Cold.
Yep.
Yeah.
See,
do we have overlap there?
I put Stone Cold as my honorable mention. It sounds weird, but I felt kind of bad I've really felt bad not having him in there, so I put him as like my number 6 honorable mention, because really, at the end of the day, like, Stone Cold is almost one of the most exciting matches you could possibly have. I kind of went classic with some of my list here, but like, Stone Cold is really just, you know what I mean? Just everything about it is just some of the best. Yeah,
I totally agree. I'll just say my honorable mention real quick is Rey Mysterio. Because I was going to have him, before we did our number 1s, I was going to have a sort of honorable mention. So I'm glad you had one, because I forgot to tell you to. I mean, like, Rey Mysterio would be mine, but Stone Cold, man, that glass breaking, it's so weird with him, because we talked earlier about like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and all the guys that WCW just whiffed on, and they missed out on him, but so at first did WWF. It's like nobody could figure out why. He was a good wrestler. He put on a good show in the ring. He was interesting to watch, but they could not figure out his gimmick. And it's just when he shaved that head and became Stone Cold, not
stunning Steve Austin with the like the somewhat Shawn Michaels like blonde hair.
yeah, losing the blonde hair. There's that, he tells that story of him losing his hair. I'm sure you've seen that clip before, where he's talking about, if I tried to go and get plugs and all this stuff and wasn't working out, and he just shaved it off one day. And his wife gave him the Stone Cold idea by saying his coffee was going to be Stone Cold before he drank it. And that's just, he put all those things together. But yeah, when he did that, 316 whooped your ass thing, or Jake the Snake at Royal Rumble.
Yep.
Or was it King of the Ring? King of the Ring. I mean, like, it just worked, and they found his persona, and he put on a good match with everyone. The Rock matches are fucking insane. Those matches are so good. And the one thing that holds him back, the reason he's probably not number 1, is if he wouldn't have been hurt by Owen Hart. Yeah. And then also didn't have some of the knee troubles, because he was flying around a lot more before those knee issues. I think he would have been even better, which is saying a lot because, man, he was so good. But when that glass would break, the pops that you would get was just so exciting. You know, the only negative really with him in the crowd was the what thing that they still do. Like the what? That became such a pain in the ass for so long. But other than that, Stone Cold's the GOAT of that era. He just is.
He really is, because he's almost like, you would say, the main reason why people started shifting way back over to WWF.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
and those Monday Night Wars, once it's like 96 and you just start getting Stone Cold really coming into his own right there, and especially by about 97, it's just like, oh, it's shifting hard.
Mm-hmm. It was just, he needed to be there because WWF, I think, was stuck in this kind of like rut where it was just Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, you know, and they couldn't go. It was those three guys, and you'd have guys kind of sneak in there. You have your Yokozuna for a bit.
Yeah,
you know,
like Yokozuna.
Yeah, Yokozuna was great. You know, Lex Luger had his run, and you had some runs in there. You can even say Bam Bam Bigelow kind of had a run with him too, but it was like you couldn't find anybody on the plane with those three guys. They could consistently stay there. And then when Stone Cold came along, now it kind of opened up the door, and then more guys started getting opportunities too. That's when Triple H started making his way through, and The Rock. It saved WWF, because I think they would have lost to WCW had Stone Cold not popped off. I think they would have eventually lost.
Yeah, it's definitely that, and then if WCW didn't like overspend on stuff, but like it is once and once. I think Stone Cold like literally leads the way, and he leads that flag for like a long time. Like it was once too. If he just didn't kind of have some of those early injuries, his career probably, he would have been like a Shawn Michaels, who probably would have been wrestling into like the 2010s like no problem all the time.
Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, and it's kind of a blessing because you get to see him in, like, when he leaves, he's already been kind of beat up, but he's still putting on a really, really good show. I'm glad he didn't try to force something that wasn't there. And you see him just a shell of himself. You know what I mean? So, that's pretty good. But man, yeah, Stone Cold's my number 4. I recognize him as more important than number 4. But I'm just talking about as my personal favorite. That's where he ranks.
Well, and I'll even say that with our list here and so on like that, these numbers are almost so close that they almost could be slightly interchangeable.
1,000%, yeah.
I don't look at it necessarily like each wrestler sort of, better than the previous one. I just go, these are just 5 on each section that I really like a lot.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. So are we at your number 3 WWF now, or
we're at my 4 WCW?
Oh yeah, 4 WCW.
So we sort of slightly mentioned this guy in passing here and there, but and I know it just seems kind of weird that I put him on my WCW roster. More as just there was a slot there, and I guess it fits better. Even though I do kind of like his WWE run more, but is Eddie Guerrero.
Oh man,
but he still has a big start though in WCW. He still goes for a while there, and in that cruiserweight division. And then he was just such a cool character. As I said, like I really think of him a lot more in especially WWF, because he just brought that alternative, attitude era, especially when he was coming out in like the low rider and everything like that. And he just had the super like, cool charisma attitude, you know what I mean? And he had great theme song and everything like that.
Oh, he did.
And then his hair. I love that he's got like the kind of like hockey mullet thing going on.
It's like Joan Jett kind of a little bit or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. His WCW, the one thing about him was his WWF run just felt like they boosted what he was already doing in WCW. It didn't feel like a completely different character. They just took what he was. I mean, I think he wore the same tights most of the time that he was wearing in WCW. Like, it just, or at least I remember it that way. I don't know if that's true or not, but it just felt like they took it to another level. But his WCW run was really, really good. He had a lot of fun. Him and Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho were just so fucking fun to watch. And they had them all 3 right there. Right there. Didn't know what to do with them. But yeah, Eddie Guerrero, he was good.
Well, that's the thing is so many of those guys that would become just huge in like the WWF, they were just at that like they were almost like the warm up rounds for WCW.
Yeah.
Yet there were some of the best matches in there and so on like that, and they just brought a lot of different stuff to the plate that eventually would take off. And I think that's the thing. It's always a bummer that he passes away so young because he really does like literally right at his prime. Like yeah, I mean he's been going for a while, but like God, he could have had a super long career.
Yeah, he might have been at the tail end of his prime physically, but he was definitely entering his prime commercially because like I said earlier, he was going to wrestle Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania. That was going to be his next thing, which would have been a fucking killer match. But yeah, Eddie Guerrero was really, really special. That's one that one really hurt when he passed away because he definitely had a lot left to give. And that Dark Side of the Ring story of him passing is so fucking sad.
Yeah.
So sad. And of course, that's kind of, I think, triggered whatever the fuck that was with Chris Benoit. Like, I'm not blaming it on that, but that definitely contributed to whatever the fuck that was.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But, yeah, I agree on Eddie.
Yeah. Just, some of the best matches, what I mean? Just great character. But, yeah, that's my number 4 for WCW.
There we go. All right. Well, we're moving right along here. So, was it my number 3 for WWF?
Yeah.
Oh, man. So right there with Stone Cold being the number 1 is there's a 1A and 1B here. And then the other person, which if you would have asked me years ago who my number 1 was, this would have been the person. I think I've gotten a little bit of fatigue with him as of late. Just a little bit. But put that aside. He's like Will Smith. Like he was so big for so long and then you get a little bit of fatigue with him, but it'll come back. But The Rock. During that run, great on the mic, great in the ring. I mean, just Stone Cold. Stone Cold was like when Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came into the NBA and fucking saved it from just being this terrible cocaine circus that would just travel around and throw a ball around. They legitimized it and they brought it to heights it had never been before. And like really, really just put it in a great place. And then The Rock was like when Michael Jordan came into the NBA, and it was just like it's already going to its peak. It's already getting better. And then now you've added this new guy that's just as electric, just as good, can have great matches with anybody. I mean, Rock, and he's so funny, so fucking funny, and he had fun with it. Like half the shit, like the people's elbow was a fucking joke. Yeah. It was literally meant to be just a joke, and he turned it into the most electrifying move in all of wrestling. And it's just so silly. It's so non-serious, but also serious at the same time. Great heel and great babyface, but great at both.
Yeah.
And I think there's maybe only Hulk Hogan can say that he pulled off both of those as well. Like all of them have their runs, but most people are known for one or the other. The Rock was really good at both.
Yeah, well, he's almost like the definitive also too, like anti-hero. I guess you could say the same thing about Stone Cold, where they're sort of in the dead center. They're not necessarily like a full heel, but they're not full baby face, but they're like the kind where like they can create havoc and talk shit, yet they're still like fan favorites.
Yeah, I totally agree. They were good, and The Rock, he doesn't have many, like other than the Stone Cold matches, like these are his defining matches, but the thing is every one of them was good. I never remember watching, they had those Mick Foley matches or the tag team match. Yeah, those are good. And the tag teams with Mick Foley were really good too. The Rock and Sock Connection. Those were good. Yeah, he always put on a good show. He always delivered. He and Triple H had good shit.
I mean, him in the Hogan match, that's just one of those ones like is the perfect example of like how you can create so much like, crowd tension by almost just doing facial expressions and so on like that and just working the audience so well. They
totally just that was Hulk Hogan reminding everybody who he was. That was like his, like, I'm still the Hulkster. Like, I can work this crowd like nobody's business. Like, I own this shit. It was so iconic when those two went against each other. Like, when that first happened, I'm like, this is not gonna work. This is not gonna work. But Hulk needed to be motivated. I think he was very disinterested in everything that happened in WCW. I don't think there was anybody there to challenge him. He was George Lucas, prequel era George Lucas, and nobody was there to say no. He had creative control. He needed somebody to rein his ass in, humble him a little bit, and make him like want to prove it. And I think The Rock did that. And only the Goldberg match in WCW really, I think, motivated him. And that was just him getting ready to take a break and take some time off. But man, the Rock Hogan thing was, that was good.
Oh,
Chills.
so special.
Yeah. The Rock is probably the best. Maybe Stone Cold and The Rock. Those two are the best. But yeah, he's my number 3.
Yeah, no, that's a good one there. So let's see if we're going up the list on number 3 on my WWF one. Is that where we're at right now?
Yeah.
Did you do your W? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My number 3 is I'm going with Macho Man Randy Savage, WWF.
Ooh.
You know, that's where I'm going to place it. And I do it for like those very, I mean, I know he's, you know, I guess we're sort of saying this is 90s, but I kind of picture this like still late 80s to early 2000s as our like barometer range of like classicness. And Macho Man from like that late 80s kind of run into early 90s in WWF is just some of the greatest stuff ever. Just his character always puts a smile on my face, no matter how much you know, you watch any of those interviews, any of those Mean Gene like specials, or it's the best. Because it's like you never know what's gonna happen. Like he's just everything about him so special. Like he's almost like, you know, Hulkster is kind of like the definitive, like, you know, when people think, you know, wrestling, but Macho Man is really that other guy. You know what I mean? Especially if there's a Mount Rushmore of wrestling, it's definitely Hulkster, you know, Macho Man, probably Ric Flair, and then I don't know. It's almost hard to pick what you would say would be the other one.
Yeah. The thing with Macho, people try, like, I've heard this is one area I disagree with Ric Flair. He tries to kind of underplay him. He wasn't that great of a wrestler. Bro, was it WrestleMania 3, a Macho Man and Ricky Steamboat Dragon put on one of the best fucking matches ever. Yeah. Both of them bringing it. Yeah. Macho Man was a great in-ring guy. Like, let's not get it twisted. He was not just a gimmick. He was a good wrestler. He was really good. He had
like a whole plethora, because not only like he's slightly smaller than Hulkster and everything like that, but he still has that big guy kind of strength and image and everything like that. Yet he still is high flying with the elbow drops and everything like that. He's got classic wrestling moves as well too for all the ground game. You know, there's a lot going on there. Plus, he's just got the great over-the-top looks, you know, the best voice out of probably anybody. You know, there's just so much going on, and just the wild thing. And really, he carried it through, because even like when WWF didn't want him anymore, it's like, he's like, well, I'll just take it to WCW, and he has a real strong run there too.
I would have loved if he had not boinked Stephanie McMahon, which people have kind of confirmed now. That's why he got kind of kicked out of the WWF. But I would have loved to have seen what they would have done with him if he did the invasion. Because, yeah, he was past his prime. But if Hogan could still wrestle, he could still wrestle. And I would have loved to see what they would have done with him in Attitude Era or Invasion Era. WWF, WCW. Yep. Like, it would have been fun. Like, who he would have clicked up with. Who they had. Because I wouldn't have minded seeing a Macho Man Shawn Michaels match.
Well, that was the big one there. He was trying to get going, was the Macho Man Shawn Michaels thing. And then Vince was like, nah, just stay on the mic, which is funny because Macho on the mic wasn't really that was definitely not his great suit. Because like
in that capacity.
No, because is like commentator. He's like Snoop Dogg on the mic, where it's like one of those ones, like he's just going to say some goofy shit that might not really be proper or make any sense. He's just there because everybody loves him. That's sort of the thing. But like, he's not a Jesse Ventura. He's, you know what I mean?
He's a soundbite guy. He's not Jerry
the King. Yeah, that's 100% what he is.
Yeah, the soundbite. Yeah, getting some cream of the crop. Yeah, Macho Man was so fucking good, and I've been in a phase lately where, my wife was talking to somebody at work and mentioned being from North Carolina, this guy, and she goes, "Oh, my husband's actually from North Carolina," and then she started talking about wrestling and NASCAR. She goes, "Did you watch that growing up?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And he was talking about Ric Flair, and so I've been in this phase where I've been showing them Ric Flair promos and stuff like that. And but the Macho Man was the one I played the other day, the cream of the crop one.
Ooh, good one.
Oh man, yeah, I'm the cream, and he beats up that little cream packet, and like it's just like there's so many good ones. Oh my god, but he was definitely the best. I think overall, like total body of work, the best promo guy. Like there's some, like, you know, Dusty Rhodes has his big one, and he was good on the promos. Flair great on the promos. Even The Rock was pretty good on some promos. But man, he was the best. He's the GOAT of that.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, he's just got the body to match and everything like that. Like, because I just went through, they had like a biography or biography that just kind of came out of Macho Man, and I just listened to that whole one recently. It came out maybe 2 months ago. Man, it's so good. Just all like the extra backstories, and this guy really deep dives in there. Has a lot of good like interviews with all the people kind of around and so on like that. Mm-hmm. And one interesting thing is that right as he was kind of early starting his wrestling and everything like that, though, he actually entered one of the bodybuilding shows that one of Lou Ferrigno was at.
Really?
Yeah, which would have been kind of interesting. I was like, oh.
Yeah, he had a pretty good physique, like underrated.
Yeah, well, he's almost one of the first guys to really start dialing it in. You know, I mean, there's a couple other guys around that time period too, but like, you know, where Hogan's big, but Hogan kind of goes for a specific kind of like physique where he's not going straight like let's get like as, you know, cut as possible and so on like that. Where Macho Man kind of really kept it in there, like, you know, he wasn't that far away that he could have entered a show and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Yeah, Macho Man. Real quick story I heard the other day, and I can't remember how I bounced into this. I think I was watching the Steamboat Macho Man match, but I guess Steamboat lives down in Florida somewhere now. Mm-hmm. I knew he used to live in Charlotte because I ran into him a couple times, but he was telling a story. He said, "Yeah, I was driving around town, and I kept passing this random tree, and it had all these memorials on it, and all these balloons and stuff." And he's like, "I gotta see what this is." And one day he just pulled over his car, went over to look at it, and it was where Macho Man died.
Oh, are you correct?
And it was that tree. And he goes, "What are the odds I'm passing by this random tree and see all these memorials, and out of all people in the world, it's Steamboat Dragon over there looking at Macho Man's memorials, like where he died." Yeah. He said, so "What is the odd?" He said, "That's so crazy." He goes, and he didn't know. Like, if he asked him where he died, I think he said he would have said Florida, but he didn't know that he was passing by where he died all the time on the way to the gym, is what he said. And he finally stopped one day and just like, "Oh my God, this is so weird that I'm here."
Yeah.
You know, it's so crazy.
Yeah. And that's always such a bummer that, like, yeah, that Macho, gets taken out really at like, what, 58 or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Had a heart attack. So he would have been like, you know, that was probably 10 years ago. Take 10 more years off of that. You know, he would have been, you know, like 40s, you know, when the invasion era, like not that old really.
No, not really. I know that, like, because that's like the weird thing is in the 90s, that's still the time period where you're like, you're close to 40 years old. Well, you're pretty much way over the hill now, which, you know, nowadays nobody thinks like, I mean, like there's guys out wrestling in their 50s and they're like just as spry as, you know, any of the other guys there. But back then that was like that thing that's like, hey man, you passed, you know, 35, you got to start thinking about something else.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's just, gosh, man, rest in peace, Macho. I would, his Attitude Era or Invasion run would have been really, really special if he didn't, you know, ruin. He definitely did that. He boinked Stephanie. He had to, because there's no other reason they wouldn't have let him around for so long. I mean, yeah, just ugh.
Well, I think like another thing. They did come mention book, but he was just so bitter because since they didn't let him really wrestle anymore at WWF, he just never wanted to come back. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
like once the WCW thing was kind of done, he was just kind of like, he just sort of disappeared. That's what they kind of said. They're like, yeah, he just kind of, it was kind of, he just went, he did Spider-Man, he did a couple other things, but he just sort of, bone saw, he did the rap album.
I forgot about that.
Amazing, there's the Hulk Hogan rap album too, but the Macho Man one is really where it's at.
I gotta listen to both of those. Oh, that's so bad. That's so bad. Okay, so we've done that was your 3 WCW.
Yeah.
Okay, my 3 was my favorite for a while, but I can't put him over the other 2 guys. But I'm gonna go Goldberg.
Ooh, there we go.
Yeah, he was like the Ultimate Warrior. They just threw his ass in there. He didn't know what he was doing half the time. William Regal, made a bitch out of him that one time. Not that. Now, if Goldberg had taken the time to learn, there are very few people that I think could have matched him because athletically, absolutely fucking insane. He wasn't just big. I mean, some of his early matches, like he would just do a backflip because he could, and just getting out of like a pin or something. Absolutely, just freak athlete. He had hops. I don't remember him going on the top rope much, but I feel like he could have done it.
Yeah, I feel like he could have too.
And just absolutely insane freak, and just the hype around him. Just nuts. So yeah, Goldberg's my number 3, and it sucks because I only have 2 left. But yeah.
Well, and Goldberg had that just win streak too, where he would just come in and just every night he would just take guys out just super like fast. That was the other big thing too. And then you're just kind of like, I wonder when this is gonna go, like because he had that long win streak for a good while.
Yeah, they should have never done that. They did certain things about his persona that was really smart. Just the intimidation, the music, just the whole gimmick of Goldberg was really, really good. I think the win streak, what they should have done with him to build him up was just have him, because they were trying to make him a heel at first.
Yeah.
Like he was definitely going to be a bad guy. If you go back and watch his early stuff, like he was going to be a villain. They should have got him into like a feud or something early on and beat somebody that he should not have beat, like a Ming or something. Mid card, but it still has a lot of clout. A Ming or a Kurt Hennig have like an upset win, and then kind of just throw them into the mix, and maybe let them the TV title in the U.S. and so on. But the streak was just ridiculous, and then they kind of backed themselves into a corner because he couldn't lose the streak at a certain point or lose a match because then that wrestler's just better than him.
Yeah.
And not that they just won a match. They had to contrive that whole cattle prod thing with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash to lose the title and everything, which WCW is already going down by then. But yeah, they butchered that. But just in terms of what he did in the ring, man, he was fucking fun to watch. The matches weren't long, but man, he was electric.
Yeah, no. And that was always kind of the cool thing about it. It was just a different experience with Goldberg.
Yeah, I want to say real quick though. I'm looking at. I think I skipped my number 4. WCW. Yeah.
What's your number 4 then?
Ric Flair.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I guess Well, you know what? That'll work perfect because my number 3 is Ric Flair, so we can just talk Ric Flair.
Well, yeah, Goldberg. He is what he is. Ric Flair. Now, if we're talking all time, he's my number 1.
Yeah.
But that when I watched wrestling when I was really little. Within my family, there's a very famous video of me being 2 years old at a wedding and doing Ric Flair impressions. Like, so I was little and I'm doing like, woo, to be the man, you got to beat the man, like mullet, all that. I had a mullet. So I loved Ric Flair when I was little. Didn't stop watching wrestling for a while. When I got back into WCW, when I first started watching it again, NWO had already formed. And at that point in time in particular, Flair had been gone for a while. So I remember one night watching Nitro, Flair's back. And they played his music. Everybody went absolutely ape shit. So that was such a huge moment for me because I was watching him again for the first time as I've gotten older. And man, that era of Ric Flair, he didn't get as many main events. He had that little stretch where he kind of like owned the company or was president or something.
Yeah.
But what he did in the ring was solid. But my God, the interviews with Mean Gene, when he handcuffs himself to the ropes on that one Monday Nitro, literally my favorite wrestling clip of all time. Not even
so
like, and they didn't fucking know he was going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he literally hijacked a live show and put on the best show ever. He's taking off his clothes and all that's like absolutely nuts. Just so good. Ric Flair's the fucking GOAT. He's the GOAT.
He really is, because it's like he's the guy who's like, he's like fantastic, like literally from 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s even, he still carries on some good stuff. Like almost nobody else I can think of does that much for that long. And, you know, he's always the attitude, you know what I mean? I mean, even like that, when he comes in the WWF and like what, like 90, 91 or whatever, where he's just like, he has the WCW belt and he shows up the WWF just for a bit. Like that seems like, that's like almost like one of the first like kind of invasion things. And then he just jumps ship and goes back because he's Ric Flair. He can kind of do stuff like that.
Yeah. He won the 92 Royal Rumble.
Yeah,
and,
that's when it was.
Yeah. And that was that's one of the best Royal Rumbles. I think he was in there from start to finish too. And no, Ric Flair's so good. Ric Flair's the best. And, you know, the blessing and curse of Ric Flair is that, you know, his wrestling persona took over his actual life. Because I think I've said before, I've seen him get kicked out of a restaurant before in person, like just being belligerent.
Yeah.
And he did say woo.
Oh, he probably.
Well,
that's the thing. I think like so many. It's like just like Macho Man. Macho Man just became the Macho Man in real life too. There was no difference. You know,
it's fucking crazy. Real quick though, has Ric Flair usurped Keith Richards as just the best possibility for immortality?
You know, he's definitely in that same ballpark category, and he's probably not that far off age wise. Maybe like 10-year difference, if that even.
Yeah, I would say probably 8 years, somewhere in there, but Ric Flair, the thing is with Keith Richards, he was doing drugs pretty late, but not like he kind of stopped at one point. He had that subdermal hematoma situation. He almost died. Fucking Ric Flair almost died a few years ago. Like he was on death's door. Like I remember looking at Twitter every day. Oh, did he go? Did he go?
Yeah.
And then he gets out of hospital and just goes back to drinking and partying and doing the same. He's still doing it.
Yeah,
and he talks about it all the time. Like he will never, at this point, he's never going to give it up.
No, he's gone so far.
Yeah, but like, how is he fucking still going? Like,
well,
what is he taking?
He said his main secret is, and this is what a lot of other guys didn't do, and this is why they end up passing away and so on, but Ric Flair will work out every single day, no matter how much partying he does. That's like the thing. He's like, you always got to get that workout in no matter what. Because that's the other thing. Do you remember like when he was 70 years old and he went out and he like deadlifted like, I can't remember. It was like over 500 pounds, I thought it was. It was something ridiculous that like you wouldn't expect a 70-year-old guy to be doing. He's like, oh, so I need to do this on my birthday. Like I think it was like 565 or something crazy like that. You know? So it's like, I think that's the thing, is keeping up those workouts. It's the other one. It's like, I remember Ozzy Osbourne said the same thing too, which sounds weird because you don't think of Ozzy Osbourne and physical fitness and the same thing. But he said on an interview once, he was like, every day, no matter how much drinking part I did, I always made sure I went and worked out the next day. And I feel like that's why Ozzy's still alive. You know what I mean? When like many other rock stars have like passed away, and here's a guy who's done way more than everybody else, and he's still there.
Yeah. Well, there's also that thing too with him, which I don't want to off track too much, but there's that thing with Ozzy where he has the Neanderthal DNA.
Oh, yeah.
Way more than most people, and like he metabolizes alcohol differently than like regular humans do. He's literally a fucking caveman, okay? Like Ozzy's a caveman. So, but oh my gosh, yeah, Ric Flair is just, if you ask somebody who's not super into wrestling, who's the best wrestler is, they're going to say Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it's Ric Flair. The only thing I think that keeps him, would maybe consider him not being number one, is that a lot of the years where he was in his prime, he wasn't on TV every night. And so because of that, he would do the same match over and over again for like weeks and months because it was just you're traveling. One night you're in Chapel Hill, you're doing a match with Dusty Rhodes. Then you drive to Greensboro, you change it up a little bit, but you're doing a match with Dusty Rhodes. And during that part of the tour, you're doing that show every night. So he had those formulaic elements that were in every single match. So he's got to flip over the top rope. He's got to do that 2-step fall down thing, which are great, and it became staples. But it was also kind of like, okay, like when are you gonna do the flip over the rope kind of thing?
And I think that's the thing. It's just Ric Flair. He's kind of like, in a sense, the holdover of the previous generation when you really think about it more than anything else. Where, you know, even though other guys are there, you know, like Hogan and stuff like that, but, you know, Hogan's still like, you know, a little bit younger and everything like that. And Hogan sort of takes off kind of as like, you know, major TV becomes such a big thing where, yeah, Ric Flair has a lot of time doing the classic circuit and then coming into it. And I think that's almost like the biggest thing. So yeah, he does kind of have that, you know, comedy act almost where like you're just refining it every single time. And then you find the bits that work the best and you got that there. And, yeah, and sometimes I always think it's like that one though. It's like he's like Flair, like really, it's like almost one of those ones. If he would have had almost probably even more camera time on him his entire life, he probably would have been the top tier guy over Hogan. You know, throw in some acting roles and all the other kind of publicity that Hogan sort of has done to make himself a little bit more wider based.
Yeah, I think actually if he would have switched over to WWF just a little sooner, like peak Attitude Era. And started that Flair with McMahon, like that feud with McMahon and all that stuff in there. Oh man, they could have done some good shit with that.
Yeah, that Flair tied in with the McMahon role could be a really cool, interesting one because you can even have Flair sort of like seeming like he's McMahon's buddy and like they're running it together kind of thing, and then you could have him, you know, do a switcheroo and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, he definitely did that a little bit. Like when he's like, now we're partners, and like I always think Vince McMahon, he's like rubbing his ear, he's like all stressed out. But yeah, Flair's, you know, the GOAT. So I guess we're both at our top two.
I think so.
All right. Well, hold on a second. Let me get my list back open. So it's your turn. So I guess we'll do our WWF top two.
Okay, so we're on mine.
Yeah.
Okay, so my number two is it sounds kind of weird. It's the Hardy Boys, but if I can only pick one of the Hardy Boys, it's Matt Hardy. That's what I'm going with there because I was always a Matt Hardy. That was always my. Everybody kind of gravitates towards Jeff. I always liked Matt. That I always feel like that was my guy right there because I felt like Jeff has all like the stunts and all the extra fun stuff there, but I felt Matt was kind of the guy who reeled it all in to kind of work,
make it cohesive.
Yeah, like really, if I think about my all-time favorite matches, they're generally a lot of those Hardy Boys matches mixed in with. I do have a kind of another bonus, and this sort of ties in there. I threw in just two ECW ones, but the Dudley Boys because I almost was gonna put them on there because like Devon and Bubba Ray, like those mixed in with the Hardy Boys and the Edge and Christian, like those TLC matches and any of the Hardy Boys tag teams, doesn't matter what it is, like. Those are those ones I think that's just totally like, you know, taking it to the most extreme and just doing it right and really just bringing in a sense that ECW kind of era. You just have all the tables, you got the chairs, you have the giant ladder matches and everything like that. You have the high flying stunts, you know, their in ring look, the music, you know, throw in Lita in there with it too. Like Hardy Boys was. Just such like it was like the perfect one for like my age. Be like, there we go. There's like they speak to me right there.
Hardy Boys were something else. Raleigh, North Carolina, by the way.
Yep,
just down the road. Here in the Raleigh metro, yeah, there were some good ones, but yeah, Hardy Boys were so fun to watch. That they kind of like revived the whole tag team thing, and the Dudley Boys too. And I think that's one era where I wish in like peak WCW, WWF, I wish they had kind of brought back like the Steiners and Legion of Doom and Harlem Heat to be at the same time that the Hardys and Edge and Christian and Dudleys were going, to have just a few more because, oh my God, that was such a good time for tag team matches because what they did a lot of like Brothers of Destruction and like having the individual stars team up, but I would have liked to have seen some of the, you know, core tag teams come back and do some other stuff with those guys because holy shit, Yeah.
Well, I remember that Devon said that on a podcast once. He's like, that was always like the biggest bummer. It's like we never got to do like a Legion of Doom versus like the Dudley Boys, you know, because I think Hawk, I think, must have passed away like right around then. But even some of the other ones too, just like the Rockers or like the Rock and Roll Express, or you know, there was a handful of like the old school kind of tag team things that when they, you know, that was kind of a big deal that would have been fun, or the Hart Foundation even, you know, bringing that back for a moment. That almost probably would have been better for Bret Hart's career as towards the end, is to do a Hart Foundation comeback.
Yeah, I actually totally agree with that. That would have, if you came back to WWF, I mean, obviously you have to have the Shawn Michaels match, which would have blown the roof off of everything. But if he came back, he had to do the Shawn Michaels angle, have a couple matches there, and then go to tag team, and with Neidhart or whatever, a shame Owen passed, because then you really could have had a Hart Foundation angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that the Hardy Boys are so fucking good, and you know they still. I think that's the most underrated element of the Attitude Era, was how big they were.
Yeah. I think just like all those matches in a sense, because that was like in a sense like if you had that cruiserweight section of WCW with lots of the luchadors and you know, the Japanese guys and all that kind of stuff. Well, really, I felt like in WWF you had those TLC guys and those matches there and everything like that.
That's a good point.
Then those Hardy Boys ones, they just went for. I mean, they're still wrestling. Even the AEW, I'll watch some of the clips. I must don't watch a ton of AEW, but like those Hardy Boys clips when they got back together there and stuff, I was like, yep, they're still killing it. Still. And the amazing thing too is Jeff's never been hurt. Like in all the stuff he's done, he's never been hurt. And that guy's done stunts that just. Like there's like that one I remember, like he jumps off, like it's like 3-4 stories up, you know, like. You know, kind of towards the entrance area, like swantons down like a maniac. Yeah.
That's like what they say about, you know, if when a drunk driver gets into a crash, they're the least likely one to get hurt because they're all kind of loosened up. Maybe that's what's going on there because, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the Hardy Boys, that's like, if I had to seal down to like my favorite matches ever, those Hardy Boys matches, like, there's so many to pick from, but like especially those TLC ones, like any of those ones in the Attitude Era, so much fun. Yeah,
that's a good one. I'm glad you put them in there. That deserves to be.
And as I said, that's like my ECW bonus was Dudley Boys, because I almost was going to put them on there, but I'm like, I'll put an ECW bonus or an ECW bonus, and then I also threw Rob Van Dam on my bonus for that one too, because I liked him a lot too.
Boy, he came in and came out really fast, but my goodness, he was good while he was there. He was
he was one of those poor guys who he fell into like a kind of bad time where they just sort of like booted him out, like, which it almost sounds funny nowadays. It's like he got busted for marijuana, and you're like, that's it. Like that's gonna stop you from putting that guy on TV, like, you know. But like that guy has fantastic matches, and I always think of him as kind of being like one of those big ECW guys that I always liked.
There was a lot of good ECW guys back in the day. I need to go on YouTube and watch a lot of old ECW stuff, because
that's the one that like I think about, because I never saw ECW on TV or anything like that. That was like one of those ones that like I caught it like on when they had like the DVDs come out and so on like that. And I knew of it, of course, but like I just never really got to see it. But I think like if you could be like in a sense like 18 years old, give or take, in like 1994 to like 98 in, you know, Philadelphia, holy crap, I think you would have had like the best, like almost the best attitude experience of any wrestling, is being at those ECW matches. I don't think anything would have been better than those. I think that would have been such a cool crowd, just a smaller arena, just a very, very kind of family fan base. Like everybody's so into it. And the cool thing is like all those guys, it's just, they're all the 80s kids that sort of grew up and then like they won the next thing.
Yeah, ECW was something special. We could almost do an episode on just ECW because it's just so different and unique, and it finally got its, you know, mainstream appeal, but it wasn't the same. It was good though. It was good. All right, so you just did your 2 on WWF.
Yeah.
So my 2 is Chris Jericho.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, love Chris Jericho. He was great in WCW too. He just was. There was no vehicle for him there to get to his heights. They could not find the place. The big stars weren't willing to work with him. Goldberg wasn't willing to work with him. I think they tried maybe a thing with Kevin Nash. He didn't really want to do it. Nobody wanted to let him move up. WWF, they come out, and Vince McMahon must have just known what he had with him, because there's that whole story where like he got invited to Vince McMahon's house, and he's still on the contract with WCW at the time.
Yeah,
WCW had taken him off TV, and he was just like waiting for his contract to end. And Vince McMahon had him in like some creative meetings, like, and asking Chris what he thought, and he's just like, yeah, that's good, you know. And when they finally bring him out, they bring him out to go on mic against The Rock, and this is peak fucking Rock. This is like the height of Rock, and that's ballsy. That's like, you know, what's his name doing that movie with There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis. Like, it's just
it was
like
a bastard in a basket.
Yeah. It's like, oh my, that's one of my favorite actors. I can't believe I can't think of his name right now, but you know what I'm talking about. That's like, they're like, you're gonna start him with The Rock. I mean, you're gonna put him over right away. But I remember when I saw that clip for the first time of him coming there, I'm like, oh, they're gonna boo him. No, the crowd was into it because the WWF crowd knew that, like, okay, he's underrated over there. Like, he's not getting his full time. And boy, he came in like just, you know, so hot, so over the top, could go against anybody, a main event against anybody from the get go, and pretty much did. First Universal Champion. Mm-hmm. Great matches with everybody. Great on the mic. I'm one of the few people that could go up there with Stone Cold and The Rock and match them. Yeah. So, yeah, Chris Jericho was awesome. So awesome.
Yeah, he just did on his podcast, he did like just a couple episodes ago, he did his like 25th anniversary of him coming out with that Rock promo and everything like that. So he like talks all about it, and then he watches it and gives kind of commentary on it. So it's kind of cool, just for like, you know, an hour and 20, he like really deep dives into there for that whole Y2J. Yeah, it's only like a couple episodes back. I literally just listened to it like Thursday or Friday.
Oh, I'll listen to that.
You gotta check that one out. It's a real good one. He goes through all that, gives all like the little behind the scenes, him getting, because that Y2J gimmick too, like that's one of those ones too, like, you know, it only could have worked. And it's funny because it only comes like, that gimmick comes like less than a year before like Y2K, but like so perfect for that time period. Just like they got the countdown thing going on. He's got the Walls of Jericho. He had a good intro song and everything like that.
A great intro song.
You know, yeah.
Well, that song was the perfect song to follow up that, like, count, because they've been doing that countdown every night. Like, what are they leading up to? What are they leading up to? And I think a handful of people knew, but I was really into wrestling rumors back then and looking online. I didn't know. Yeah. And yeah, when he showed up, just place went crazy. He goes toe to toe with The Rock, and the theme song was so good. Like, that was just like, that is still one of my favorite. It's the best reveal of any character ever. Like, just awesome. But I remember watching that night, and I was like, oh, Chris Jericho, they're gonna try this for real. It worked out.
Yeah, totally worked. Yeah, you know, yeah. He's always been one of my top guys too. I don't have him on my list, but like, I've always liked Chris. I'm actually gonna go see Chris Jericho in December. We're gonna go see him at the Whiskey A Go Go. He's playing with his band called Quarantine, which where they just do all random ass Kiss songs. So they don't do no hits, no greatest hits stuff, no music videos. They got to be like kind of like total like B track kind of song, which is fantastic because that's like the Kiss stuff I really like. So they do all these sweet covers, and we're gonna go see him there. It's gonna be awesome.
Man, I fucking love Chris Jericho. Good God. Yeah. And he's got great stories too. Yeah. Great stories. And he does what Bret Hart can't pull off, where he can bitch about the business, but because he makes it funny and because fun, and because he's not so self-serious. You know, he can laugh at himself, which I don't think Bret Hart can do.
No.
But because of that, he can get away with it, and it's like, okay, I like when his whole story of winning the Universal Championship, and he goes back and he like has a pizza and he drops it on the floor, and it's just like him alone in his hotel room, and nobody gives a shit. It's just like it's so funny, it's so funny, but. Yeah, so
Well,
Chris Jericho's my
I
number
always
two.
think he's got one of the best podcasts of all the wrestlers. Like I literally been listening to him for like 10 years, I guess, on there ever since he started it practically.
Yeah, he's way ahead of everybody else on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, way better than Kevin Nash's podcast. Stone Cold's the
Stone
second.
Cold had a great podcast. It's just a bummer he stopped doing it like a handful of years ago. That's like the thing is kind of because he had an amazing podcast, and I don't know why he stopped. I never looked into it, but yeah, it's just he hasn't done one in years.
Yeah, and then that one was kind of like I think co-produced by the WWF, but yeah, no, Jericho's has always been.
Yeah, his is his own, so he can do kind of whatever he wants. And I like because he's got wide topics and everything. It's not just wrestling. He'll have movie guys on there. He'll have ghost adventures. He'll have history stuff on there. I mean, he kind of does a little bit. Everybody sort of kind of apes Joe Rogan a bit, but Chris Jericho always has a good alternative opinion, and he's always fun. And I think that shows in his wrestling. That shows in just his personal and just even in music and all stuff. He's a guy who he does all sorts of stuff.
He's a Renaissance man.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, well, so we both done our. Did you do your two? So we're doing our two WCWs now.
So we're doing two WCWs. So you want me to go for mine?
Mm-hmm.
So my number 2 is Booker T for WCW.
Oh, that's good.
Because Booker T, like to me, when I think of like the WCW guys, because strangely when I think of like Hogan and Macho and all that, I think of those guys as being like they're WWF guys that have showed up at WCW. I've always kind of thought that way. Same with even Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and all that stuff. Even though I know that they're main guys there. There's guys that I think of being like the WCW guys, and that's where I think of like Sting. That's where I think of like Diamond Dallas Page. That's where I think of Goldberg. But really, Booker T's that other guy that I think is being like one of those main and he's like a pure WCW guy. He wrote it to the very end. He was there the whole time. He had Harlem Heat, which was an amazing tag team. I mean, we just watched that not too long ago when we did that Bash at the Beach episode because they had a tag team match on there. They were always super fun and everything like that. And then it's like he gets his own kind of solo run and everything there, and he becomes WCW champion. And he gets to even leave WCW as champion on the final night, which is just badass. And then he has a strong run when he comes in the WWE, where a lot of other WCW guys either they do the Kevin Nash thing, where like I'm going to get paid, so I'm going to go sit here for 2 years and do nothing. But where he was like, no, I'll show up and I'll become a main player of The Rock and Stone Cold and all these guys like that. And I felt like he fit right into the WWE just perfectly, just kind of molded right into that time period.
Yeah, he had to reinvent himself just a tiny bit. But man, I loved WWF Booker T. And I always hated that his run in WCW didn't start a little bit sooner. I always felt like that when DDP moved up to the World Championship ranks and was competing for that, he should have taken his spot more. He also had some great fucking matches with Chris Benoit.
Yeah.
In WCW, like great fucking matches. So yeah, that Booker T, I almost put him on my list too. He was just off the list. And I think that's kind of how he would be that way in WWF too. He was solid in both. I don't think he ever got his full chance to be what he could have been if he had stayed in one of the companies for longer. I think, man, but yeah, Booker T is awesome.
Yeah, and I still just give him credit. I would give credit for the guys who ride like the entire distance too. Like they don't jump ship or anything like that. Like he's in WCW from like 91 or 92 all the way to the very end. Like
yeah.
Like that to me is like perfect. He's like a perfect company man. Just goes the distance, and then he's in WWE for till the end of time practically. I saw him at one of the Comic-Cons I was at. Still looks solid as all can be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Booker T's awesome, man. He's been on a few podcasts and told some good stories. And when he says, some of these other wrestlers stole some of his stuff, like The Rock even stole some of his stuff, I think he's got legitimate grievances. He doesn't bitch about it too much. He just says, hey. As a matter of fact, I think he did kind of steal some shit from me, but he has a good story about Stone Cold giving him the receipt. when he accidentally punched Stone Cold in the face pretty hard and Stone Cold got him back. Booker T's awesome.
Yeah.
So my number 2, WCW, is coincidentally very, very similar to, and you just mentioned him, but Diamond Dallas Page.
Okay, well that's my number 1 in WCW. So.
Oh, is it? Okay, awesome. Yeah, DDP is the biggest star that they created, I think. Like, he didn't get as hot as Goldberg did at Goldberg's peak, but he slowly rose through the ranks. Macho Man gave him his chance, but he had good matches against Hogan, Nash, great match with Goldberg. I think he got the best match out of Goldberg. I think that Halloween Havoc match, I think that might be the best match Goldberg ever had, like full match. Mm-hmm. So they were good buddies and stuff too. Had good matches with Sting, like
lots of those.
Yeah, lots of good matches with Sting. So and then even when he was in the U.S. title ranks, Kurt Hennig, Booker T, the Raven, he had a really good run with the Raven. DDP was fucking awesome. Had the cool gimmick, the Diamond Cutter, the Nirvana song. My uncle, I remember him saying one time, he's like, "Who's that construction worker that throws up the diamond sign?" I was like, "Oh, that's DDP, man. He ain't no construction worker," but I see what you're saying.
Well, see, I think that's why I like Diamond Dallas so much, is because he's that guy that says, "Hey, man, you know what? You can do it too. It's not too late." And I think that's the thing, because he's probably the best example of the everyman wrestler. Mm-hmm. There's 2 types of everyman. There's the everyman wrestler where there's like the kind of like the slightly kind of overweight looking guys. Like I always feel like the Kevin Owen. He's a very everyman like kind of guy. Yeah. Great wrestler, but he has that very like, he looks like if a guy just got up off the couch while watching a pay-per-view and just jumped into the ring and started like causing havoc. But I feel like Diamond Dallas, he's like the everyman, but with like flash and style too. Mm-hmm.
And he the way he did, Randy Orton kind of has the same move, but man, Diamond Dallas Page did that really well. That Diamond Cutter was one of the best finishers of all time. Mm-hmm. I always wanted that T-shirt. I need to get that. I always loved the DDP, the blue, the T-shirt he had. Like,
oh yeah. God, I should look one of those up too. I've been kind of in a nostalgicness of buying some wrestling T-shirts again too.
I've been there too. I've been that and NASCAR T-shirts. Like there's this Kyle Petty one I've had my eye on. It's the mellow yellow car.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. So yes, I need to get like an NWO shirt, like a DDP shirt.
Yeah, I just bought a Macho Man recently, one just like the purple one that says Macho Man on it. Kind of thing. He's got.
I want to buy the Macho Man Randy Travis one. Have you seen that? It's like Randy Travis.
You mentioned it.
Yeah. That's like, if I could encapsulate my childhood in a T-shirt, that's probably the one. But no, DDP was fun, man. He was so good. They fucked up his run in WWF. They had a chance to make it good. They fucked it up with that whole stalker thing, and it wasn't good.
That's kind of like, I always think that was always the biggest bummer, I thought, was that when the WCW merged with WWF, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. This is going to set up so many great things. And so much, there was like that 6-month period, maybe it was a year, I can't remember, that was kind of cool, where they used a lot of those guys, but then it just felt like they used them, and it was like all Team Dragon. Used them, and get out of here. Use the guy, and get out of here. And like, that was kind of about it, and the handful of them they kept, like Booker T and so on like that, but like, yeah, a lot of those ones there, it's like, yeah, Diamond Dallas should have been like a mainstay guy in the 2000s in WWE, and same with so many other ones too, it's just like some of those guys, they kind of came in for like one pay-per-view match to kind of make it feel like a big deal, and that was about it.
I always wanted to see like a really, and maybe they did have this and I don't remember it, so I might be sounding like an idiot right here, but I always wanted to see like a really good like DDP versus Cactus Jack kind of feud. I don't know why, but I feel like that would have worked so well.
That's the thing. I can't picture seeing that, so I don't know if I've ever ran across that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because there's so many wrestling matches out there. If you look hard enough, you might be able to, but I'm surprised that that would have been a good one right there. Yeah,
I think any of the Mick Foley characters in DDP, I think, would have worked really well. And DDP could do a little bit of hardcore stuff too sometimes. So I could see that working, but we can't bring up DDP and talk about like this fucking yoga shit that he's doing. Man, that's like pretty impressive. Like it's really kind of bringing it to the home and being mainstream. Like some of that stuff he's done is actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then the fact that he fixes other wrestlers all the time, like Jake the Snake and everything like that, and I think Lex Luger's the other one that
Yeah.
he's been working on. You know,
Lex Luger looks like shit though. Good
God,
God.
I know. Did he was on one of those interviews or whatever, like talking on one of the ones. I was like, boy, he looks like Nigel from Frasier now. Like,
He does.
like if it didn't pop up his name down there, I would not have would been like, oh, that's Lex Luger. That.
Yeah. Like most of them stay at least kind of big, even if they stop working out and stuff. They still kind of have some bulkiness.
Well,
to
he
them.
did have that thing for a while where like he was almost kind of like fully disabled a bit. Because I
Oh,
remember
really?
DDP talked about that, and he got him from going being like in a wheelchair to like back to like moving again.
Oh wow, that's pretty impressive. Okay, but he's done that for several people.
Yeah, so he's done that for a lot of guys. And now the other thing too, he got really into the hemo cuffs just recently. He was talking about that on CT Fletcher's podcast. And of course, since it's DDP, when he sells stuff, it's never like he sells a pretty expensive version of whatever he's into. But so those hemo cuffs are like you like strap them around your arms and then you like pull it tight like you're gonna cut the blood and then you work out with it. Because I have a couple of those from like beforehand. I was like, oh, I'm gonna check out what the DDP ones are like, and it was like, oh, they're like $300 for a set when you could just buy a normal one for $20 on Amazon.
Yeah, yeah. But I still like DDP though.
I don't care. No matter what, DDP, he's always one of those guys. He pops up on a podcast. He's got a classic match. I'm interested. You know, as I said, just the fact that he started wrestling at 35. Come on.
Yeah. So yes, that was my number 2 WCW.
My number one WCW.
Your number 1 WCW. So I guess we'll do. I've already said my number 1 WWF. So what's your number one? Sorry, what's your number 1 WWF? And I'll do my number 1 WCW.
So my number 1 WWF is Hulk Hogan. So I'm going with the Hulkster. You know what I mean? No matter what, at the end of the day, it's like that kind of thing that like, yeah, Hogan might not be perfect in just like every like one aspect. Like maybe he's not the greatest wrestler or anything like that. Maybe he's not the greatest guy even on the mic or whatever. But Hulk Hogan is the full package. He is wrestling, from pretty much the start of like, I guess you would sort of say mainstream till now, still relevant. I don't care like anything. Like if he's got a match, I'm interested. It's going to be fun. He's going to work the crowd well. He's going to have all the classic moves and everything like that. The great looks, the fantastic Hulkamania voice, and I picked the WWF era, even though I don't get me wrong, I do like Hollywood Hulk Hogan as well too, but like classic Hulk, such a good run. And then as we said before, like the Hulk when he comes back to WWF and does the Hulk and the Rock match on WrestleMania 18, holy crap, that's so good.
The thing is with him, he's such a blessing and a curse because the thing is, people like to shit on him, and they do tell some stories where I'm like, oh God, you're such a dick. He was such a dick.
He does get in the way of certain things.
Yeah.
And will shoehorn his way into stuff too. He, like NWO, even though I like him in NWO, he does sometimes also feel, even though he's great and he is kind of needed in there to make it just have that ginormous pop, he does also feel like he sort of shoehorned his way in front of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash.
Yeah, he does. He shoots the hornets his way. He refuses to put people over sometimes when he agreed to do it initially. The whole Undertaker story when he, said that he was hurt or whatever when he wasn't. But the thing is, also, especially during the 80s, I'm sort of an apologist for him because he was the face of the company. He brought it to new heights.
Yeah.
And you're not just going to relinquish that to anybody. And a lot of the things I hear about him from the 80s, I think are just people being jealous. Now, when you want to get to like the early 90s and his like last of his run in the original WWF, to what he did in WCW, because he was such a like really in the way in WCW. But some of that stuff is jealousy, but some of the other stuff, man, like he was so big. He was big as wrestling was. Like he was kind of like even bigger maybe than the sport for a little while.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. He so carries that there. Now WCW kind of screwed themselves over by giving Hulk that ridiculous contract that it pretty much made him like in charge. Like he pretty much was Mr. WCW.
Yeah.
Like that literally came back to bite him. You know what I mean? Like so, like all your story writing and so on like that. Well, if the Hulkster doesn't approve, that's it. You know.
Yeah, he almost even with Starcade kind of like fucked that up with Sting, and they've been building that up for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Which he kind of actually did fuck it up because that match did not live up to the hype, and I don't think it was Sting's fault. But
no.
you know, but Hulk Hogan, he, like I said, blessing and a curse, because without him, you don't have a lot of the other stuff. I don't think wrestling goes to the level it does without him. You know what I mean? Nobody else could have done the Andre the Giant match. Nobody else could have done it. And made it seem believable that he won and actually turn it into this big thing and turn Hulkamania, like when it comes to like promoting, when it comes to like merchandise, when it comes to going into the movies after.
Yep.
He was ahead of the curve on everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's just the thing. It's just the overallness. It's like I don't care what it is. It's like every time there's a Hulk Hogan match, I'm so interested, no matter what. Just, you know, Hulkamania right there. It's as classic as all can be, you know. And yeah, he is. It's like saying your favorite player is, you know, Michael Jordan or something like that. But at the same time, it's kind of like you can't really argue, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And work the crowd. I think he's the best worker of the crowd ever. So yeah, so Hulk Hogan. So that's your number one WWF.
Yeah.
So my number one was Shawn Michaels, but we've already talked about Shawn. So my number one WCW is Sting.
Sting. Now,
Yeah.
I almost had him on the list. He was very close. He was like my honorable mention on my WCW section.
He, great in-ring performer. What's amazing about him is he has two, like, imagine if the Undertaker's American Badass character took off even as big as Undertaker did. And imagine it was a completely different type of brand. That's what Sting pulled off. Like, he went from Surfer Sting, bright neon colors, bleach blonde, you know, high flat top, you know, whatever. And then he goes to, you know, the Crow, long black hair, all that stuff, pulls both of them off miraculously. Great matches in the, I mean, some of the best, I think some of the best matches in WCW. Great matches with Ric Flair, multiple great matches with Ric Flair. My favorite match of all time is actually, I think it's 1992 Bash at the Beach. It's Cactus Jack versus Sting.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, and it was back when WCW was doing that thing where the runway was elevated to the edge of the ring. So if you flew somebody out of the ring at that particular part, they would land right on that runway. And so it was like, you know, it was really almost, they used it as like just a really long ring, essentially. And they were utilizing that very well in that match. And just like, it was just one of the most underrated matches of all time, in my opinion. But man, so I thought I muted myself. But yeah, great with Mick Foley, great with Ric Flair. Pretty good match with Bret Hart. The only drawback to his career is he didn't get, I wish he would have went to WWF way earlier to get like an Undertaker match in, Shawn Michaels match in, and a Stone Cold match in. If he would have wrestled those
instead
three,
of him going with like TNA, it would have been better if he just would have jumped. It was almost like for a longest time there, it's like he just was like, you know what, I'm going to be that guy who doesn't go to WWE.
Well,
it's almost like he'd been so long with not going towards there. It's almost like he was trying to find every excuse in the book to kind of go somewhere else.
Yeah, and then when they finally brought him in, they just didn't do it well. And but man, Sting, two amazing personas, and it just, you know, he didn't even have to have the belt to be considered like the brand, but he was the franchise. He was the brand in WCW for a long time. Oh, he had a good match with Goldberg too. Pretty solid match.
Well, I always think of Sting is like, in a sense, he is like the ultimate face of WCW. If there was one wrestler to choose, I think he is It's easy to say kind of like Flair, just because I think Flair has more like, legacy since he's just been in wrestling longer. But realistically, Sting's kind of there way more than Flair is as far as the whole run of WCW goes.
Yeah, when it switched from NWA to WCW, Flair was huge in WCW, but that was Sting's franchise. He was the biggest draw to the whole thing. And even when Hogan came in, they held off on that Hogan Sting match for a really long time, and they had to turn Hogan into a villain before it could even make sense, because you couldn't have him fight before that.
No,
but they held off on that forever, and that match was just as big for Sting as it was for Hogan. I mean, that was because that Crow thing. And we've got to give credit to Scott Hall, because that was his idea. Was Crow Sting was Scott Hall's idea, but yeah, man, this definitely is, as a kid, one of my favorites, but it's just crazy to me how he'd switched two completely different things. It's the same guy, both of them work, and he get the same moves too.
Yeah,
he didn't just he just kind of altered the personality around them, but Stinger Splash, Stinger Death Drop, his version of the Sharpshooter, what's it called, the Scorpion Deathlock, I think. Yeah.
Well, so the fact that it's like it's the same name too. It's like it's almost like you would almost think if you looked at him and you didn't know anything about it, that they would have two completely different names. Like no, he still kept all that, but just completely radically shifted his character and stuck with it. I always kind of wish he did bring back the Surfer Sting, like at some point, just here or there.
I was always disappointed by that too. I always thought that would have been a great thing to do, but I think if he had had a longer run in WWF, if he had done a few more matches, maybe they'd find a way to sneak that in there, especially if he had done it way sooner.
Yeah, you'd have to do it kind of sooner, because I think it's almost like by the time the WWF thing or WWE thing happened, it was at that point where if you would have done the Surfer Sting thing, there would be a lot of people be like, "Who's that guy?" Because it would have been like almost like so far past that point that everybody thinks of it. His real big pop is once he does have Crow Sting. That's what he's more known for, and I get that. But I still feel if he would have brought back Surfer Sting, it might have had that thing when like Hogan kind of brought back the red and yellow again.
There is a really great match, late WCW match. And you talk about big pops. One of the biggest I've ever heard. It was, I want to see if I can get this right. So it was on a tag team. It was a 6-man tag. It was Hulk Hogan, Sting, and Goldberg. And I think it's versus Nash, Rick Steiner, and I can't remember the third guy on the other side. I think it was Sid Vicious.
Yes.
Which, rest in peace, he just passed away.
Yeah.
But that match is amazing. That's when Hulk Hogan brought back the red and yellow after being an NWO for all those years. And that was a late run WCW. That was probably the last really good match. It was on Nitro.
Yeah.
And boy, the crowd goes absolutely fucking nuts when they fire up the old Hogan music and he comes out and doing the fingers and all that stuff. But Sting was in that match too. And that was Hogan, Sting, and Flair. Hogan, Sting, and Goldberg on the same team. That's pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, no, that I do remember that one. That is totally a good one right there.
Yeah. Well, we made it through. I think it's a pretty good list. I mean, there's some big shockers. I think that no John Cena on either of our lists.
Well, it sounds weird. John Cena's a guy that I actually kind of liked more, like way later in the day. Like when he first kind of came out, I couldn't. That was a weird one for me. Like I was like, I don't get this guy. He's confusing. You know what I mean? Like
I kind of agree.
Who is he appealing to? Like it was one of those like, and maybe I was like, I'm not the demographic. As I said, I feel like you had been like a 10-year-old boy who was in the suburbs. Yet you still liked rap and Mexican stuff quite a bit. Like it's a very like mixed match like thing there, like of like a modern day like 2000s kid. But as time has went on, it's like, oh, I really actually that's how a lot of those guys, even The Rock. I remember like in the 90s, The Rock was always kind of like, oh yeah, he's not bad. I appreciated him way more as time came on.
Yeah, there was a lot of them. Like, we didn't have John Cena on the list. We didn't have Undertaker on either one of our lists.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle, even though if we were doing like best of all time, I think all three of those guys would be mentioned in there.
McFoley's another one too.
Yeah,
we sort of mentioned him on the side, but like, well, that was the thing that was like putting together these lists though. You kind of do it. It's like it's kind of hard. Like sometimes almost I felt like almost even 5 is kind of like it's a little bit of a struggle to put together 5.
Yeah.
Like,
but we would have had a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah. We would have went for day. I thought we were gonna have a little bit more overlap. It was actually kind of nice in a sense we didn't as much, but
and our overlaps weren't super close. So I think we had Shawn Michaels and
Flair. Flair was like I think the closest one because I think they almost like butted up against each other. And DDP.
Yeah. And I think if both of us, if we were doing all time, like Flair would be in number 1, but his later run WCW was good, but not as good as his NWA shit and all that. But yeah, man, there's a lot of big wrestlers we didn't mention, but like you said, we did 5, and Triple H, another one.
Yeah, Triple H,
Big Show, Kane. Yeah, a lot of fucking really, really good ones.
Yokozuna, we mentioned him, but I like him a lot.
Yeah, Yokozuna was really, really awesome. Yeah, we could go on and on naming a bunch of wrestlers that we never even discussed. Triple H is a pretty egregious one.
Yeah, but Triple H is always a classic too. I mean, I felt like Shawn Michaels sort of leads into that, even Ultimate Warrior. Like, even though it's like one of the ones like I always like a good Ultimate Warrior match. I don't care if that guy learned to wrestle in 6 months. Whatever. Like,
coincidentally, his last WWF match was against Triple H.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think it was at WrestleMania too.
It was a WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, it wasn't a good match, but
Ricky Steamboat. I mean, there's so many. If you really start going down the list, there's so many.
Yeah, Ricky Steamboat was another good one. There was just like you said, there's so many big ones that we just couldn't get to. Didn't mention China or any of the girls, Sable or Trish Stratus.
I kid you not, China almost did make my list. Like, I almost wanted to put her on there because that's like my favorite of like the woman wrestlers. Like, she just had the ultimate attitude, and she could out bench press Triple H and all kinds of stuff. Like, just things like that. It's like she's just so cool, especially back in that attitude era. Like when like a time period where they're she was kind of like, because beforehand they had like some female wrestlers, but a lot of times they were kind of almost like. I mean, kind of scary, you know what I mean? Like, like, where'd you pull this person out? Like, China felt like, oh, she could, like, hang with everybody like that, and she could almost, like, was believable, and not like, as I hate to sort of say it, there's a lot of the female wrestlers nowadays, I call them kind of powder puff, where they just, they feel so phony. Like, I don't feel like they could hurt anybody. Like, it's just like, you know what I mean? And now the other thing that bothers me too is you can't have men versus women anymore in wrestling. I think that's the most bizarre thing. Like, it's predetermined and so on. Like, it's not like the UFC where there's kind of a reason why that doesn't happen. But like, and it's like really in wrestling you can't have a man versus a woman. Like, especially even in the video games too. It's like I don't know. I guess they just don't want little Billy to go like throw a woman off a Hell in a Cell into a table or something like that, and then think he could do that in real life. I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, but
well, I did hear Jericho talk a lot about working with China. He hated working with her because she was really stiff and all that stuff, and so I think that might have had something to do with it back in the day. And plus, it's just got to be awkward because some of those wrestling moves, it's just it's just gonna be it's a hard sell on screen. No pun intended. It's yeah.
Well, and I do think China, because I remember in Triple H's book, I think she does kind of get started. Once again, she's not one of those wrestlers that had like she worked for 10 years and then got her big break. I think she sort of got kind of hired more as like she was the bodyguard or whatever for Triple H, but she was, I think, just a bodybuilder or kind of a female weightlifter. And then she kind of had the Ultimate Warrior thing where here you go, here's 3 to 6 months of wrestling training, and now you're in the ring.
Yeah.
I do think, because the more I think about that in time, I go, I can see where that's kind of a problem, because you can learn the basics, but there's that little extra percentages that like you only get like when you've been doing it for years upon years, especially when it comes to kind of dangerous moves where you need to have that ultra precision.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about wrestling is if you base it on skill and ability, the people who would have been big stars versus when you factor in the X Factor stuff, the charisma, the on mic skills, just the TV presence, just being on TV. That stuff sometimes usurps to some extent just technical wrestling ability. And I think the best wrestlers are the ones who have both. That's why I like Shawn Michaels. He has, and Ric Flair, they have the ability, but they also have all the flair and, you know, whatever. Because if it was just technical ability, I mean, we're looking at William Regal and Fit Finlay, some of the matches they put on were fucking good. So, you know, it's a weird thing.
Yeah, well, and it's like that thing that I do think there's something to be said about the guys that have like 10 years before like they kind of make it, sort of. I think that builds up a lot, you know. And a lot of the best wrestlers, you know, Macho Man, Hogan, Ric Flair, you know, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, they all have that like long run where they're in a sense like dialing in their craft. You know, Bret the Hitman Hart, of course. You know, where some of the guys that, you know, Goldberg, Warrior, China, you know, they are brought in pretty fast. You know, even The Rock. Rock's brought in really fast, too. Yeah.
The Rock had just had the, you know, I think he was very fortunate that he was a legacy guy and was able to, you know, really work it out. But, and he was a very good athlete, which is why I feel like if Goldberg had time to work it out, I think he would have been really, really good. Because he did figure out some pretty good stuff, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, there you go. That's our top 5 from each brand. And we kind of did Attitude Era, but we kind of didn't. We just did our top 5. Yeah, 3 episodes of Analog Legends in, so we're going to be dropping the show soon. And you know, with we did, you know, the first episode we had our you know, just kind of reminiscing about the analog era. And then last week we did top 5 Disney films, animated Disney films. Now we got wrestling, so we got a pretty broad paintbrush of stuff. So anyway, but go back and watch some old wrestling stuff. They have it on Peacock right now. You always go to Netflix next year. I think it starts where it'll be, I guess they're moving all the stuff over there, and they're gonna have Raw over there. Yeah. It's just fucking insane. So
I got that Vince McMahon documentary coming out.
Yeah,
I trailer right before we were doing this.
Looks really, really good. I'm very interested in it. And you know, he's on my list. So
yeah,
there we go. But anyway, but as always, you can find me at Via VHS on X and TikTok, and I don't really go on the other social media sites very much, but you can go to oldmanorange.com and find all the stuff that Spencer does and his comic books and his Old Man Orange podcast and everything, all kinds of shit over there. So any last comments before we head out of here?
No, this is I've just been in a good wrestling mood, and it was just fun to sit down and talk about all our kind of favorite characters, heroes, and what have you from the good old days. Yeah, I'm just looking for some more good times in wrestling, and I think we'll have some of that coming soon.
Yeah, I agree. We're gonna do some wrestling stuff here on this show, and it's kind of our outlet. We've talked about doing a Retro Slam Masters podcast, and maybe one day that'll still happen. But for now, this is our wrestling outlet. So anyway, thank y'all for listening to Analog Legends, and stay tuned for more. Y'all have a good one, and we're signing out.